Everybody's back?
Yep.
Okay. So going back to circle, we just had a discussion about how circle needs to have a few things. I need to know what's important, radius. And then what can I do after that? Well, I can change the radius. I can get the radius. You know, I have these other things that are going on. We just briefly talked about rectangle. What's going on in rectangle? All I need to know is length and width. From there, I could calculate area if I wanted to. I could calculate diameter if I wanted to. Lots of things going on. I could also say, wait a minute, I want to change the length and width. So again, I'm going to use this common term like you saw in my circle radius where I said set radius, and I'm going to do set length and set width. And if I have the sets, what else should I have? Well, over here I had get radius in case I forgot. Yeah, so I might want to have get length and get width. All right, some of you are still not sure what I'm talking about. Let's see what we got. Okay, in this math class that was written, we had a bunch of blocks of methods like POW and square root that were tucked away. All I needed to know was how to get access to them. All I needed to know was if I say math.pow24, it's sending the arguments 2 and 4 over to this method POW, stored in what's called the math class, and a value is going to be returned. Well, what we're looking to create now, and what you did in the book, was create a class. You created a class called rectangle. We're looking to create a class called circle. So for our circle class, we need to have a field called radius. In rectangle, we had 2 fields. One's called length and one's called width. Now, once these classes are written, I don't have to write them again. And this is where this whole object-oriented programming comes into play. And I'll explain that a little bit more in a second. Okay. So now I have this circle and I have all of this information. All of these methods are written and they're tucked away somewhere. Okay. I need one field called double radius for circle. I had 2 fields for rectangle. One was length and one was width. I have methods for both of these classes that we're looking at. Okay. In the method circle, I had set radius and get radius. We called it get area, but what if we say calc area? That might be a little better. And what if we say calc circum? That might be a little bit better of a name. In rectangle, you remember seeing things like set length, set width, get length, get width. And we have calculate area, calculate diameter. Now, in the methods, when we start with the naming and we call them set and we call them get in the front, what we have are, with the set, these guys are called mutator methods because we're going to mutate and change one of the fields. We have the get methods, which are called accessor, because we want to access a value. We want to get the length for some reason because we might forget what it is. We want to get the width for some reason because we forgot what it is. Okay, so let's start circle over. And again, what I'm doing is making a plan of how to create this block of code called a class that is separate from my program, but my program wants to use it. All right, I am going to redo what's called a UML chart. Because once the UML chart is laid out, my notes basically, then I can go back and write the class pretty easy. All right, I said I need the first thing as a field, and the only field we had was radius. Okay. And what data type do we want to make radius?
Double.
A double. Okay, so that's great, a double. But if you remember seeing it in the book, there was something else that went with length and width. And your very first your very first rectangle code listing that you typed in to get the first one to work, you saw that there was something that looked like private in front of it. Okay, so I have private double radius. Now, what the private says is I'm going to create a variable radius, but that variable radius is only used in my class. By making it private, I'm locking out when I get ready to write a program to access stuff in this class. I can't get at radius and screw it up. I can't accidentally give it the same name and mess it up over here. Okay. Now our methods. Hopefully this will all these pieces will come together. First method I have is I want to set the radius. I want to be able to give it a value. And I'm going to make that method. I'm going to be bringing in a double. And it's going to be a void method because nothing's being returned. So when the user calls .pal, it sends arguments over. When the user, in our case, calls set radius, it's going to send a double over. Are we going to return anything? No, it's going to be a void method. Again, this was my mutator method. I'm going to have a get radius. This time nothing's coming over, but I'm going to return a double. And again, this is my accessor method. I want to access the value of radius. These are pretty easy methods to write. This get radius, all it is return whatever the value of radius is. This one, set radius, brings in a value, and in its body, it's just going to be radius equals whatever I brought in. Those two guys aren't too bad. All right, the next one I had, calc area. Will I need to bring anything in to calculate the area? That's a yes or no question.
Yes.
What do I need to bring in?
You need the radius.
Okay, so here's what's happening. The radius is already over here because when I first access the class, the way I get the radius in there is set radius. So it's already there. So I don't need to bring anything in. In this case, I'm going to use the radius for my, and it's called an object. An object. Remember a moment ago I said object-oriented programming. So I'm going to use the radius that's already stored for this object. Same with calc circum, C-I-R-C-U-M, empty parentheses because nothing's coming in. I'm going to access the radius that's already in here, and I'm going to return a double. Okay, so this is now a block of code called circle.java, circle.java that I'm tucking away. Now, what I mean by tuck it away is I have to have it in the same folder as my program so that it can access it. All right, so now I want to get ready, and before I actually write the code for this circle class, I'm going to take a look at the program that uses it inside the demo. Int radius. Actually, let's change that and make it a double. Double radius. Well, let's just call it rad so we know. Somebody should be using a pencil, shouldn't they? So in my program, I have something called double rad. Now I may even ask the user to tell me what rad is. Now, double rad says I'm creating everybody can still hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Stuff pops up on my screen and I wonder sometimes. Okay, so in my program now, I have this input radius. I have radius is declared of type double. That's its data type. Well, what we did up above here is we created a class which is really a new data type. It can only hold one value in this called radius. Rectangle could hold two values, length and width, but I'm creating a new data type. So down here, just like I had double rad, I'm going to have my data type circle, and I'm going to create a variable called circ. Now, that guy right there is called an object. Very important word. Circ is an object of the circle class. That means because I created circ, everything that's up in my circle class, I can now use with circ. Okay, it's an object. In fact, the fancy thing that we do here when we say circle circ is we instantiate an object. Okay, so I'm going to instantiate an object of type circ. Now let's see, I did an input of radius, so now I'm going to call my set radius method. I'm going to use my object name, circ. Sort of like we did with strings, we used the string name. I'm going to say circ, I'm going to set the radius, and whatever the user input, that rad, I'm going to send up to circ. So now up in radius, up in circ, right? Whatever value that the user had as an input value is now getting set up and it's stored up in my class. It's up in this particular object called circ. What if I wanted to get the area? What would I call? I would maybe have a variable called area that equals, we called it calc area. And once again, I didn't need to send anything in because when I call calc area, it's going to do the work to calculate the area based on what the radius is that's stored in my class. So now, where's this? Well, hang on, I forgot to put, let me rewrite this. Area equals, and I forgot to put the object name, circ dot calc area. My mistake. So area gets a value of my object name, similar to when we did strings, dot the method that I want to call. It says, oh, go up to calc area and find out what the work is, what the radius is, and know that I'm going to return a double so that it can come back to my main program and store it in here. It's a little bizarre. Be a little bit easier to teach if I had a whiteboard in front of me and you all were in class and I could get questions. So this is where we are right now. All right. So let's go back to what you have done. You have done something called rectangle, and you have a rectangle.java. Okay. So you had that. And what happened in this chapter was you slowly built rectangle where you kept adding pieces and adding pieces. And I think I had you do code listings up through 6.5, 6.6. Does that sound about right? Or did we go farther up to 6.8?
I think it was 6.9.
6.8 and 6.9?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's take a look at, I'm just going to take a look at 6.7 and 6.8 right now. Okay. 6.7 is where we're at. And what's going on in 6.7? Well, I have a class called rectangle. I've been adding stuff to it. Okay. So now I have like a new data type, capital R, rectangle. So I can instantiate objects of type rectangle. So what's going on in the rectangle? First thing I see, and I'm looking at lines out of the book, it's lines 8 and 9. Private double length, private double width. Okay, they are my fields. So I created two fields, length and width. Now you notice there's no main in this. It's missing. We don't need a main. This is just a storage spot for all of those methods and the information I need to work with those methods, the information being length and width. So if I look inside of there, after I have my fields, I have my methods. And my methods are set width. The next one I see is, well, I missed get length, or set length, set width, get length, get width, and then finally get area. Are you with me on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so this is now just something that's sitting in the same folder where I'm going to store a program that's going to use this class. For what we're doing for our purposes, we call it a demo program because we want to make sure everything works appropriately so that then if somebody later wants to use this, they can go back and grab rectangle. Code listing 6.8 was in fact the demo for this. And I start looking down, it's called, it's called rectangle demo.java. So when you turn program 6.1 and 6.2 in, everybody will be uploading two files. You'll upload a class file where all of those methods are stored, and then you'll upload a demo file, which you're going to write that will test, make sure all the methods in your class works. Okay, so I come into my rectangle demo and I see rectangle box equals new rectangle. Now, what did I do with that line of code? I instantiated an object called box. As soon as I do that, I know right away that my object box is going to be able to store a length and it's going to be able to store a width. It has its own unique length and width. I could do rectangle box 2 equals new rectangle, which means I'd have another object called box 2. It would have its own length and its own width. So I could create as many of these as I wanted to of this data type rectangle. Now, all of a sudden, some of you are going, wait, rectangle box equals new. We've seen this before, this layout. And yeah, we have. We were instantiating objects way back, chapter 3. But we were instantiating, our favorite one was called input way back when, or keyboard. Okay, so now box is created and I can use anything, any of the methods up in rectangle that are there with box. And as I start looking at the program, I see, okay, so one of the things I need to do is say box dot set length. I'm calling the method set length and I'm going to send a value over. In this case, it was 10. And then I want to get inside of my box, I want to make sure I can get a width up there as well. So I'm going to send a width up, in this case 20. So it's going back up to where my object is. Right now, length is 10 and width is 20. So now that that's all stored up there, you know, I can be working my way down and all of a sudden I can do, and as you see the example in the book, system.out.println box dot get area. What would the area be in that system.out.println? Well, it's calling box, it's saying get area. And if I remember the method get area from before, the method said simply return length times width. So it's going up into my box It's saying, oh, length is 10, width is 20. I want to return, and the value would be 200 that's being returned. So box.getArea would be 200. You with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Some of you had questions when you were doing code listings, and slowly you had to keep changing rectangle, adding new things as you learned them, and then working with that current demo. I think some people weren't adding to rectangle each time through. So we said, well, hey, in our rectangle, we can get the area, but what else could we get? How about the perimeter? Okay. So what I want you to do for the last 15 minutes is on your own. I want you to have code listing 6.7, code listing 6.8. Inside of code listing 6.7, code listing 6.7, I want you to add another method. The method I want you to add is called get circum, to get the circumference. Okay. Once you do that, in code listing 6.8, I want you to have another, well, how we're doing it here. We're doing it with print statements, but I want you to go ahead and print out the circumference. Okay. So you're going to, in 6.7, you're going to write get circum. 6.8, you're going to use get circumference. Does that make sense? So if I have test data and my length is 10 and my width is 20, what should the circumference give me? 20, 10, 20, and 10. What should the circumference give me? Add them up.
60.
60, right. So your output for this one should be 60. Questions on what I want you to do? Questions going once, going twice. Okay, so today we covered sections 6.1 and 6.2. Wednesday is going to be your test. Next Monday, we'll come back and we'll get back into these classes. Okie doke.
I have a question. I wasn't able to get to my mute fast enough. It kept saying selected, but then it wouldn't tell me what was selected.
Okay.
Just to, sorry
Rainbow.
about that.
Go ahead, Amy.
How do you want me to approach this?